Hello everyone, welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie. I'll be your host today. Thank you guys for joining me. Back at it again with yet another video. And this week we are going to be talking all about this up and coming cosmic clash. Now we are going to be seeing Mars in Libra coming into an opposition with both Saturn and Neptune in Aries. Quite the energy and quite an unusual transit. So I'm excited to kind of break this down for you guys, give you some insights, and help you kind of figure out where to spot the conflict, how to negotiate, and how to kind of tame some of the flames that's going to be coming up over the next couple of days. Now, if you guys like my content, you want to see more of it, click the bell button below, subscribe to the channel. This will alert you as to when I have new videos. I'm here every Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday, doing my best to make sense of what's going on in the cosmos. Equally, if you guys want to see more about me and my work, if you'd like to book a session or pick up a transit calendar for your own personal astrology, check out the links below. Head over to beyondtheveiltarot.com. While you guys are there, sign up for my newsletter so you're alerted as to when I have new content coming out, new courses and webinars. There's lots of stuff kind of going on as we're heading into the end of summer. Fall, we've got eclipses going on. We're also going to have all kinds of new things that we put out for 2026 as we get later into the year, so you don't want to miss that. All right, well guys, if you caught my Sunday video, you know that I already kind of covered Mars entering into Libra. I kind of talked about where the action is going to be for the better part of the next 6 weeks. But I promised you guys that I was going to make another video talking specifically about the Mars in opposition to Saturn and Neptune. Basically, you're going to be feeling this from about August 6th to the 10th. Mars transits have a tendency to hit a little bit early. The exact oppositions are going to be taking place at 1 degree of Aries and 1 degree of Libra. So we'll talk about who this is impacting the most, but what you guys need to know is that this is a major celestial showdown. So we're going to feel like this week it's a little challenging to find the balance. Obviously, whenever we see oppositions, it's one thing versus another. So it's kind of set up almost as it's like a boxing ring, or we're kind of being triggered from something outside of ourselves. And so kind of the themes that are going to kind of come up this week are diplomacy with Mars in Libra versus drive, right? And also action and the direction we want to go in versus potential roadblocks. We are going to see some clarity issues, especially clarity and confusion problems, because we also see an opposition to Neptune. So it's not your stereotypical Mars-Saturn opposition, because we have Saturn and Neptune in conjunction, and that makes it a little bit more complex, a little bit more complicated. And I think that even though this opposition can be challenging and it's definitely serving up some feistiness, there is a silver lining. And so today I'm going to take you through some of the themes of this transit. We're going to talk about what to watch, how to spot some of the conflicts and some of the intensity that's coming up in your life, and where to seek shelter, right? That's very much Jupiter and Venus coming into conjunction in Cancer. This is all tied together, so stay with me. We're going to break it down. Grab your chart and let's get comfortable, and we're going to do a deep dive into what this means for you guys. I feel like going into this week, and maybe it's just because I'm a Libra rising, but just thinking about the Mars transit, I keep thinking of WWF, and the announcer kind of pulls down the mic and they go, "Let's get ready to rumble," right? That's literally what this week is going to feel like. We're going to see it in the world stage. We're going to see it in our own lives. So the question is, are you going to put down the boxing gloves and opt for peace? Are you going to find new ways to stand up for yourself? Are you going to be less people-pleasing? Are you going to be less aggressive? Finding the balance is going to be quite complex for a lot of people. Now, like I said, there is a whole laundry list of people that this is also going to be impacting. I think collectively, when Mars and Saturn oppose, we're going to feel that because, Saturn and Neptune are obviously ruled traditionally by Mars. Mars is the dispositor because these two planets are in Aries, and Saturn and Neptune are collective planets. And we're seeing this kind of incoming Saturn-Neptune conjunction brewing really all year until we get to the beginning of 2026, where there is limitations, there's hesitation with Saturn and Aries. There's also doubt with Neptune and Aries, and there can be this feeling of whether or not we're having a breakthrough, becoming aware of where we stand, where the boundaries are, who we are, and how we're going to kind of build a little bit more momentum and confidence moving forward. Well, this week with the Mars opposition, Mars is going to kind of get your goat a little bit, and it definitely can be from relationships, partnerships, clients, therapists, people that we encounter in our everyday. That's really going to kind of push our buttons and try to get us to have a reaction. Now, if you happen to be a Mars-ruled sign, okay, so if you are an Aries or an Aries rising, if you're a Scorpio or if you're a Scorpio rising, this is going to be more of you guys maybe kind of being like the protagonists a little bit, because Mars is the faster moving planet. Mars rules your chart, so it's going to represent you coming into a challenge or a separation, or maybe a little bit of conflict with another person. It could even be like a roadblock or like a slowdown. Versus, other signs. So Libra and Libra rising, you guys are the ones that's kind of feeling a little bit more charged, might be feeling a little bit more spicy, and definitely is going to be more personal. And then if we have these Saturn ruled signs, so we're looking at Capricorn and Aquarius, you guys obviously are going to be receiving an opposition from Mars to your ruling planet, Saturn and Aries. So somebody's going to be checking you. People can be a little bit more combative. If you guys stay tuned to the end of the video, I'm going to take you through the 12 rising signs. I'm going to show you where this is happening, and I'm going to help you guys navigate this and give you some tips for kind of surviving the week. Now, this is going to be happening at 1 degree. So if we follow degree astrology, 1 is strongly connected and associated with Aries. So whenever I see 1s, whether planets are in Aries or in this case, Mars is in Libra, yes, it will show the effects and the themes of Libra, but it's going to be in an action-oriented way. So this is why I love degree astrology. It's going to show us where there can be a little bit more context or a little bit more of a clearer picture in terms of what we're going to see kind of manifest in our lives and on the world stage. So 1s always deal with things that we construct or things that we build. So construction workers, buildings, contractors, things that we build up, things that we break down or demolish is very much Aries. Also, it's about things that we produce. So production, place of production, factories, workshops, factory owners. It also is strongly tied to Aries themes like, military. So soldiers, uniforms, weapons, rifles, pistols, bullets, anything that deals with shooting ranges, anything that deals with like artillery, that is 1 degree. And Aries also deals with a corner, or I guess 1 degree deals with a corner or an angle. Engineers, engineering, machines, tools, things that are sharp. So think like nails, knives, needles, something that cuts. And this is about being brave, hardworking, industrious, always attentive, enthusiastic, and somebody who does not really like routine. It's also about the head. So it could be about the head. It can be about the nose, anything that's kind of connected to blood. Things that are red, flames, matchsticks, lighters, firemen, physical injuries, wounds, cuts, to fight, to slap, blow, aggression, assault. It's also about sheep, Germany, anything that's hot or spicy, sports, sportsmen, anything kind of connected to muscles and leaders, and to be the first. Okay, so obviously it's like a laundry list. But these might be some of the things that we see kind of like pop up throughout like the next couple of days out in the world. So this will be exact on August the 8th. So you guys are watching this on the 5th, in the final moments of Mars being in Virgo, which I feel like for the most part it's been pretty productive. Even though we saw reactivations from the recent eclipse, we saw a Mars South Node connection, and the last couple of days have actually been, I think, the most gnarly personally, because Mars has been in conjunct or quincunx Chiron. So we've been kind of seeing where there's some health habits, work habits, things relating to coworkers, partners, schedules, anything revolving around, bad habits and things that need to change with our routine, and how it's actually kind of creating some kind of conflict or wounding or issues like on a personal level where we are feeling isolated or separated in some way, right? Chiron. So this is now wrapping up. We're done. Mars is going to enter into Libra. And then on the 8th, is when we see the exact opposition. But truth be told, you guys will probably start feeling this from the second Mars moves into Libra, because it's going to be within about a 1 degree opposition. So it'll be in the evening hours of the 8th that we're going to see Mars come into opposition with Saturn. And if we start with the basics, an opposition in astrology really highlights the themes of the Aries, Libra axis. So it's cool to actually see planets in this axis because I feel like they're definitely going to show you exactly what they represent. These are essentially two planets that are sitting 180 degrees away from each other. So it's kind of like a cosmic tug of war. And this creates tension. It also creates polarity, and it's about finding the balance between these two opposites. So we have Mars that's in Libra. This is the faster moving planet. We have Saturn and Neptune in Aries. And basically from the 6th until the 10th, you're going to be feeling this caught in between Libra's teamwork and Aries kind of me first mentality. So this will bring up that action versus restriction, or, reality versus our dreams kind of vibe. For me, it's kind of like, trying to plan a group project where everyone's got their own agenda, and it's challenging, but it's also a chance to kind of grow and harmonize through those differences. And you guys might kind of see some of those themes throughout the next couple of days. Now, in particular, Mars in Libra, it's got its pros and cons. I would consider this the diplomatic warrior, right? That's how I kind of see Mars in Libra. And if we zoom in on this particular transit, Mars is the cosmic warrior, full of passion. It's about drive, and it's very much like a let's do this type of energy. But in Libra, this is the sign of balance, and it's also the sign of relationships. And Mars is usually a little bit more combative, and now it's going through like a Venusian sign. So Mars is having to be kind of putting on like a diplomatic suit, right? And it's kind of like a knight trading in their sword for, a charm, and using that as like their weapon. So they're going to get what they want through kind of charming people, working with them. Yes, Mars in Libra, can be a little indecisive. It can be a little unsure when it comes to making decisions. But its strength here is that Mars in Libra is an excellent negotiator, right? That's why I love Libra Mars, Libra Suns, Libra Mercury, Libra Risings. These are people who are really good at listening to other people. They're really good counselors. They get feedback. They're able to kind of be there and hold space for others. So with Mars in this sign, it's really fired up to fight for fairness, right? To fight for relationship, to fight for justice, and really smooth over any relational issues with charm. And traditionally, it can take bold step forwards in relationships and partnerships. So obviously, if you guys caught my Sunday video, I talked a little bit about one of the ways out of this opposition was to lean into Uranus and Gemini with, exciting new ways of communicating and connecting. Maybe it means that, we're traveling more, we're learning languages, we're using new information. There's also possibly new ways of learning and connecting in relationships. And also there's going to be a Mars trine Pluto, which is really going to highlight the power of working together and moving forward towards our collective goals. So quite unusual astrology all around with that trine, and then also this opposition happening at the same time. Now, this could materialize as advocating for equality, or maybe spicing your love life up with, something a little bit more flirty in terms of the vibes. The catch here is that obviously, Mars is moving through a sign that it is not entirely comfortable in. So, Mars in Libra, not only is it a little indecisive, it's so focused on keeping the peace sometimes that it might want to dodge tough talks, or it might be even overthinking every move that it's making. So Mars, wants to charge forward, but Libra's like, hold on a second, let's wait. What if we upset someone? I don't want to rock the boat. And it can kind of lead to passive aggressive vibes, or even stalled relationship plans. So I think that, this really is connected to the fact that Mars in Libra it's in its detriment. It's not totally comfortable here. Mars would prefer to be direct and bold, but Libra is all about compromise and harmony. So it's really, it's asking a lot of Mars, not only to move through this sign, but also to be in opposition to Saturn and Neptune. It's going to feel a bit restrained, and it's going to feel less fiery and hopefully more diplomatic. Now, Mars is the ruler, right? It's the dispositor of Saturn and Neptune in Aries. And this is about as close as you are going to see these two in this particular sign until we get the beginning of next year. They're both retrograding back into Pisces this fall. And Saturn retrograde is the taskmaster that is now turning within. So, Saturn and Aries also, it's definitely got its own kind of like issues here. I mean, Saturn being in a position where it's also not comfortable. It's moving through a sign that lacks accountability, right? Or experience, or maybe even maturity. Aries is the baby of the Zodiac. So it's also struggling to shine. So there is some similarities through, Mars being in a sign that is kind of disrupting relationships, Saturn being in a sign that doesn't know how to kind of take charge, and then they're in this frustrating opposition to each other. Now, Saturn is like the cosmic coach, right? This is like all about discipline, structure, and long-term goals when we talk about Saturn. But, Saturn in Aries, it has some hiccups because it can be impulsive. It can also be too focused on being independent or doing things itself. So Saturn's kind of strict vibes really feel out of place in this particular sign. It's almost like you're trying to build a house, in like a raging bonfire. You cannot create structure or anything when everything is just constantly kind of like in flames. So in Aries, Saturn's boundaries can come off as harsh. It can also come off as a bit selfish, sometimes causing delays or frustrations, especially in how we assert ourselves. So we might kind of feel like we're hitting a wall with this transit, and we're trying to start something new. And we're trying to kind of let that inner boss or like that inner leader shine. But it seems difficult in actually like finding the way forward. So then we've got Neptune there. So there is this kind of clouding of, our boundaries, our limitations, maturity, even the direction forward. Identity issues have been a huge thing with Saturn and Neptune, I think, in Aries. And then we see this opposition to Mars. So it's going to feel a little bit like a cosmic reality show with like some serious drama. That's what I'm anticipating. I think Mars is ultimately really pushing for fairness. It's pushing for teamwork. It's also pushing for relationship-focused action. But Saturn in Aries is throwing up these very rigid roadblocks, and Neptune is really fogging things up, making it more confusing. Also, it's kind of hard to tell fact from fiction. I think it's going to be quite the thing to kind of witness. We haven't actually seen Mars in Libra in opposition to Saturn in Aries cycle really since like the late 1930s. I went back through the last couple Saturn cycles with Saturn in Aries. Most of those cycles I actually saw Mars was in the opposite sign. So, we were seeing like Mars-Saturn conjunctions. We weren't seeing a lot of oppositions. But in the early 1930s, the late 1930s, this was like the buildup that was going on to World War II. So there was a lot of things that are going on in Europe. There was like a lot of like separation and division and like conflict going on and like preparations. In particular, we were seeing a lot of preparations like in Germany for war. So I think that's interesting, especially since that 1 degree, was kind of tied to Germany, or like the Aries energy was kind of tied to Germany. So over this next particular week, I would say these are the themes that you guys are going to want to watch for the most. And this is what you're going to kind of see archetypally out in the world and maybe even in your own life. First things first is Aries is the self, and then Libra represents us or teamwork or others. So you guys are going to see this whole who am I versus who are we together tug of war between collaboration and independence. I think that something that I have come to really appreciate about the Aries-Libra axis is I have found that when planets are going through the 7th house and it's opposing the 1st house, that sometimes it can bring up challenges, it can bring up conflict, it can also bring in relationships, it can bring in therapists, it can bring that person who gives you feedback. It can also bring in an astrologer or a mentor of some kind, and somebody who is going to perceive you in a way that you may not see yourself. And a lot of that is because the 7th house deals with the shadow self. So there's a reason why we attract what's in the 7th house, and that's because traditionally that's kind of our shadow self and what we're kind of seeking, and what we may not realize that we actually bring in. And I like that because I feel like the Aries Libra aspects can really suggest that people come into our life that may challenge us, they may push us, they may ask us to get out of our comfort zone, they may ask us to, do better, they may, encourage us, they may coach us to really kind of get outside of ourselves and our old kind of habits and sometimes our selfish ways of kind of like looking at life with like blinders on. It's very much like Aries first house. So be mindful that, you may have a business partner that is calling on you this week being like, hey, I need your support. Where were you? You may have a client that's like, how can you help me? This is what I need. You may have a partner or a spouse that's telling you, hey, this is what you're doing and you're not even aware of it. And that can be beneficial. And sometimes with seventh house, like Libra energy, because it's almost like I said, it's like a courtroom where it's like a boxing ring. This is where we air stuff out. So, Mars wants conflict and it wants arguments and it wants fights. And Saturn wants to kind of hold back and it does not feel as confident when it is challenged, especially in Aries. And the conjunction to Neptune is going to make people more passive. It's going to make people go, turn a blind eye to it, or this isn't worth my time, or I'm not going to argue, or what's the point? Or you may feel like the victim and you may feel like you're incapable of being able to kind of stand up for yourself or respond. So watch for some of those dynamics. Certainly Mars is going to want to hit hard, maybe not as hard in Libra. And maybe it's that we're being pushed by other people or we're pushing the people that we're in relationship with a little bit more because we actually want to work together. We want to better the relationship. We want to see things grow. We want to see things evolve. And some of these relationships will show up in a very powerful way in how they communicate with trines to Uranus and Gemini. Maybe we're approaching relationship conversations differently. Maybe we're going on a trip with someone and then we get to know them better. And also that trine to Pluto really helps us kind of get into alignment and figure out how we can make big changes in the future and overcome what can be things that feel scary. So rather than checking out and backing down or disappearing with Saturn and Neptune in Aries, part of the challenge is just going to be becoming self-aware, showing up, right? Hearing other people out, not being defensive, not beating ourselves up either. Now, part of the theme with especially the opposition between Mars and Neptune, which can be, draining. What is the point? What are we fighting for? Whose fight is this anyway? Kind of vibe is going to be about action and restriction. And Neptune can definitely make us feel a little bit more worn down with some of the oppositions. Maybe, Mars wants to move fast, but Saturn's like, not so quick. We need to set some boundaries. And I think it is smart, just in a literal sense, if I analyze the astrology with Mars and Libra, to not rush things. There are certain things that we should not rush, right, in Libra territory. So this would be legal battles, right? This could be legally binding agreements. This could be getting married, getting engaged. It could be also, making big decisions about making up or breaking up. And we may be able to avert some of the conflict that can be kind of coming up, thankfully, because the ruler of Mars, Venus, is going to be in conjunction to Jupiter. So we've got the two benefics coming together, and this is that silver lining that I said is kind of offering us some shelter. I'm not crazy about a Mars-Neptune opposition, even if Saturn wasn't there, because usually there's a lot of issues with deception. We can see people, having ulterior motives, or there can definitely be a tendency for there to be manipulation or to be distorting things or, making things up even to make people angry, right? To get a reaction out of someone. So I look at this and I'm like, we're definitely going to see, Mars acting out, and it's going to be hard to determine what's real. And some people may be, doing things just to try to provoke or get a reaction out of other people. They could be quite, literal and in your face where, somebody is really trying to focus on, talking to somebody, connecting with somebody, bettering a relationship, trying to make amends. And somebody could be giving them the silent treatment with Saturn, Neptune in Aries. It's like somebody's like, nope, I'm done. I won't respond. There is no reaction, no response from me. I'm not answering the phone. I'm not engaging. I'm just done. And that's their way of kind of cutting ties with that Mars-Saturn opposition. But Other people will play games, and you'll see some people who will be like, well, if you're not going to take me out, then I'm going to go out with so-and-so because obviously, you don't care about me. So I'm going to find somebody or something else, which is going to, put the pressure on Saturn and Neptune retrograde, where individuals are going to go, do I get mad? Do I get sad? Do I react? Do I say something? Do I not? Oh my God, I'm not good enough. And you're right. I am this terrible person. And then it's going to create more kind of like self, wounding. So that's the other side of this that I'm not totally crazy about, is that I think people are definitely going to play some games. And it's right at the tail end. We're kind of coming up to where Mercury is getting ready to station in Leo, where there certainly has been a lot of like love and romantic drama that's been in the air. Now, you can't talk about Libra without talking about justice. And I think that's like a huge theme. We think of like the justice system, the legal system, anything kind of connected to law, order, balance, diplomacy, fairness, and justice versus freedom. I think is like a really big theme, because Aries is a fire sign. It does need freedom. It does need independence. Mars in Libra is going to fight for what's fair, but Aries demands personal freedom. And this transit can show up in a number of different ways that I think can be really specific and connected to some like legal court cases and things that could be playing out around that time. Personal freedom, especially revolving around the body, anything revolving around personal rights. Saturn, Neptune could be about religious rights or affiliation. It can also be things kind of connected to health and health care, mental health, things that are also connected to veterans or people who are in the armed forces. Now, something that I think about is just that darn Saturn, Neptune in Aries has always, for me, as I've been looking at it the last like year or two, has always felt like, man, that's going to be like some covert warfare operations, right? And now that Saturn and Neptune are retrograde, individuals and I think large numbers of the population are kind of waking up to, oh my God, there can actually be covert warfare going on. There can be propaganda campaigns. There can be media. There can be, TV shows. There could be movies. There could be celebrities, people who are influencing this kind of culture of, angry, hostile, divisive, and in particular, people who can be, I think, we've seen a lot of issues with racism. We've seen a lot of issues with people who have been very much, feeling righteous in the things that they say about people's culture or about their belief system, about their religion. And it's definitely created some issues in society. But what if I told you guys that this is like a turning point where there could actually be a bit of a shift with Mars going into Libra, especially with the trines to Pluto and Uranus, that we could realize that a lot of the stuff that's being generated, that's coming out of the media, that's also stirring the pot and making everybody angry, could very much start to go away. And we could start to hear a lot about like new laws and legislation and other things. And also, certain media companies going under, certain shows and hosts like breaking up and no longer like working together. I think we're going to start to see some of that stuff start to dissolve. But I keep thinking about covert wars, and Mars is definitely associated with war as well. So a lot of the covert operations and things that I think have been going on has created a great deal of strife and conflict in relationships, right? Mars in Libra. And whether that's relationships within families, within, marriages, within communities, right? Now maybe we're going to start to see, because this Mars-Saturn conjunction was seated actually in Pisces, just exactly how much damage has been done because people have been, believing or buying into or like consuming, all of this stuff that was like really creating a lot of division and separation. So I look at this and I'm like, okay, more exposure revolving around military operations, covert operations, maybe sneaky power plays that can be kind of going on in our lives. I look at this and I'm like, well, it could be, a coworker smiling, to your face and, then quietly kind of stealing the spotlight, right? Not necessarily warfare, but it's like, wow, okay, that's not something that I saw coming. And like, obviously that's something I need to watch out for. It could also mean that we could see things like globally nations negotiating peace while secretly kind of beefing up their, defense systems, right? They're saying they want diplomacy, Mars and Libra, but behind the scenes, they're actually strategizing and they're kind of like preparing for something that could be more combative. Diplomacy issues for sure. So I'm going to say they're probably going to see some issues with stalled talks. So planning like a group trip, for example, right? Where one person's like super stubborn and they're Saturn and another person is like really vague about committing. That could be more Neptune, and it's leaving you stuck. And you're like, well, how do I plan this trip if one person's not getting back to me and the other person is like really rigid about exactly what dates they can take off? On the world stage, we could see trade deals hitting walls due to rigid policies or mixed messages. And then something else that comes up is like definitely some passive aggressiveness. We could see some passive aggressiveness with Mars and Libra, and then the opposition of Saturn and Neptune is people going like, is it just me? Am I crazy? Am I perceiving this? Like, does that person have it out for me? Like, is there something going on with their tone? Like, what's the deal? So there can be subtle shade, right? Like a friend giving you the silent treatment instead of talking it out. Or maybe you're just kind of noticing that, something is kind of off with the tone of your partner. And, they're not saying anything's wrong, but they're just kind of very short and curt in how they engage with you. We can also see that there can be social media debates that are just turning into like major jab fests where people are going back and forth at each other. But they're doing it from this kind of, protection from being, behind a screen, right? Saturn and Neptune is when you can't see me, so I can say what I want to say. Now, I think with Mars being the dispositor of Saturn and Neptune, it's kind of a cool twist because at least both Mars and Saturn are in placements that they're not totally thrilled with. So that may actually lessen, especially with Saturn retrograde, the harshness of a Saturn-Mars opposition. I've seen people who have, go through Saturn-Mars squares or, transits, and they materialize as, issues with authority figures, broken bones, being more prone to getting stopped, for speeding and all of those things. But here with Saturn and Neptune, both in, some debilitated states and in opposition to each other, no one placement is stronger than the other. And I think that this is really, telling because Saturn is not really sure how to set boundaries yet. And Mars moving through this sign, I think, is going to give it more of like a relationship focused kind of lens. And it's going to be able to kind of give us that feedback that Saturn needs in order to kind of strengthen its vibe. So it'll be interesting to see what happens throughout this, last couple of weeks. As I was looking at this aspect, I was like, in my opinion, I think the silver lining and the shelter that we will actually be seeking in the midst of this opposition is likely going to be the Jupiter-Venus conjunction. And the reason being is that Venus rules Mars. It's the dispositor of Mars. So even though they're opposing each other, Venus is moving through Cancer. It's coming into conjunction with Jupiter. It's no longer squaring Saturn and Neptune or Mars. And Venus and Jupiter are the two benefics. So, yes, the opposition is intense, but this conjunction is actually really, really, really powerful. I think it's going to really help kind of guide what's going on with Mars to act more with love and not be indecisive. And the Venus-Jupiter conjunction is going to soften anything that's going on with the Mars-Saturn opposition. So it's going to be more nurturing. It's about emotional connection, softening the more kind of passive-aggressive tendencies that we'll see with Mars and Libra. And obviously, Jupiter is the planet of abundance. So it really amps up this kind of warm, fuzzy vibe, countering some of the harsh limits that we see with Saturn, the confusion that we see with Neptune. And it brings in optimism, it brings in hope, and it's going to kind of feel like a cosmic hug. So it'll create this really safe emotional space for us to recharge and find clarity if we're needing to take a break from someone or something, if we are feeling stalled or delayed. I think it's really about leaning into self-care with this transit, and that might mean that there's a cozy night in or maybe bonding with a loved one to dissolve any of the tension. Now, I've also used the example in recent videos where I'm like, well, there's some conflict in a relationship, Mars and Libra. You're not wanting to do anything too crazy or anything dramatic, and maybe end a relationship or kind of uproot your life or maybe your family. And you're trying to find, the solution. And quite literally, Jupiter and Venus might mean it's like, well, going home, visiting family, going and having a talk with mom or spending time with grandma, Maybe it means that, you're trying to create a little bit more of like a Zen den or something that's more peaceful and safe and secure at home. And it can also mean that some of the, tension that's kind of going on between ourselves and other people are directly tied to home and family and domestic matters. Kids going back to school, right? Moves, relocations, changes with in-laws, family moving in with us having to improve homes, having to sell homes, and also the stress and the joy that kind of comes with the home expansion. Everybody wants a new house, but moving into one is like, more problems. You have usually bigger space. Usually you've got to spend a lot of money to get into it. You got to move. And then you're having to kind of like improve that space that you're going into. So good problems to have, but certainly can create some tension amongst relationships, even in the best of relationships. So something that you guys are going to want to watch for is obviously any covert conflict, okay? And some of this conflict, some of these wars are not necessarily things that we are bringing on ourselves. It's going to come from tension and static from people outside of ourselves, Libra. So when you're looking at your chart, you're going to want to look at, okay, where is Mars? Mars is where the conflict is going to begin. Where is Saturn and Neptune? This is where it's going to be kind of, you're going to see the tension and whether or not that party or that kind of part of your life is actually going to restrict or hold back. And is the tension coming up because there's been something that you have lacked taking care of or addressing, right? Or maybe something you haven't been aware of. And then the Cancer area of your chart is actually going to be where you're going to seek the solitude and kind of like the peace from the storm over like the next month. So watch for covert conflict, right? I think that can definitely be a thing. Watch for diplomacy issues. If you can, try to negotiate. Timelines can be a huge theme as well with Saturn in Aries. Whether or not we are holding ourselves accountable, if we're meeting deadlines, if we're late, if we're showing up on time, that kind of stuff can definitely be some of the conflict that can be coming up. And be mindful of the passive aggressive energy that's in the air. Maybe I think the key here is to just on a bigger scale, take a step back and kind of be like, okay, are we going to fight fire with fire? And are we going to opt to kind of put down the boxing gloves and find ways to actually work through conflict rather than just throwing up our hands and, kind of being evasive and checking out? Because I think some people will actually fall into the trap of Saturn and Neptune, of either not wanting to, participate and being a team player in a relationship, or potentially being in a situation where they're not even aware that there is a problem, and then suddenly a partner is blowing up. They're blowing up because of things that you weren't aware that you're doing. So yes, this transit can feel like a bit of like a cosmic roller coaster, but I think that all in all, if we are finding balance throughout the next couple of days, and balance doesn't necessarily mean that you're just, people pleasing and not stirring the pot and backing down. Part of this transit is people who have to stand up for themselves now will. Certain signs are going to feel that more than others, but yes, Mars and Libra wants harmony, but I would say you can't sacrifice your needs to keep everyone happy. That's just not possible. If you're sacrificing your needs, Saturn, Neptune is very much self-sacrifice to appease other people, you're doing yourself a disservice. You're draining yourself. You're going to make yourself feel emotionally, energetically, spiritually depleted. You're going to create health problems. You're going to create issues. I mean, Saturn and Neptune is notorious for depression, right? Or people who are just kind of like disassociating. How many relationship issues are going to come up over the next week because we're realizing that our partners are disassociating, and when we're connecting with them, they're not engaging, and also they're not self-aware. Probably a lot of them. We're probably going to see a lot of people who are going to observe this. But I think that, if you stand up for yourself and if you do it with kindness and if you don't necessarily burn bridges, instead you say, hey, what can we do to fix this? Let's talk about it. Certain relationships could actually be stronger. Now, we also have to check boundaries, because I think Saturn in Aries is obviously a difficult placement to have Saturn, but it is retrograde. And I think Saturn, all in all, it generally is a strict planet. And really what it's saying is that we need to make sure our goals are realistic, and that, we are really applying our goals in a way that seems like they're actually achievable. And part of that means that we have to be honest with ourselves. Saturn and Neptune, we have to have a sense of clarity. We have to have a sense of faith. And in order to do that, we have to set realistic goals so that way we're not getting frustrated. we also have to be really mindful of the fog because Neptune is very close by. And so I think with Neptune in conjunction to Saturn, we really have to double check facts and maybe trust our gut a little bit more, be making sure that we're not falling for illusions. And so there's an interesting thing with like Saturn and Neptune where it can be a lot of, am I fooling myself? Am I just playing a certain role? Like, do I know who I am anymore? Is there identity issues? Or are certain people now being held accountable for portraying themselves in a certain way in a relationship that is not truthful, not honest, right? I think that's the other part, is that now people are going to start getting agitated or angry, or they're going to be reacting to or holding people accountable, especially legally, right? Mars in Libra, or in a relationship sense, for where they have failed to be honorable, be responsible, be honest, and have transparency. I think this is like now where people are going to kind of get their wrist slapped for not kind of, doing what they quote unquote should be doing. And Saturn and Neptune retrograde is really kind of exposing everybody. It's kind of like Scooby-Doo, where they're ripping the mask off of the monster's head, and we all see who the bad guy is. So now we'll see with Mars and Libra, people more willing to talk about it, people more willing to kind of, break certain alliances and certain relationships off if they feel like certain people are not who they said they were. And it can become very public and it can become very nasty. But I think that this is much more likely to be impacting us in the global sense of, relationships that we have within our country. Leadership is very much Saturn, so a lot of it can be whether or not certain people are breaking with certain political parties or certain faith in certain leadership, and it can also mean that there can be some challenges that are going on a personal level where a lot of people are kind of breaking off and they're separating from certain family relationships, right? It can be brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, whatever, roommates even. And that tension is actually being driven from the Jupiter-Venus conjunction. Even though Jupiter is a beneficial planet, it expands to the point where it makes things kind of pop. And they're both in a sign that deals with the moon. And the moon is emotional. So it can basically be saying people are going to be a lot more emotionally, kind of in their feelings than normal. Maybe people are a lot more likely to make some big emotional decisions about relationships and partnerships and the impact that it has on the home and family, and also just where we're living or any kind of like domestic stuff in that sense. Thankfully, though, I think the Venus-Jupiter can be more of the shelter that it's actually kind of giving us, that if we're needing to kind of take space, we can go into the Cancer area of our chart and go, okay, well, there's been this separation, or there's been this breakup, or I cut this from my life, or this left, or that failed, or I got delayed, but I can enjoy myself for a little bit here. This is going to give me safety, security, peace, solitude, and maybe even a little bit of pleasure. So what might we see on the world stage? Well, I guess we can get speculative if you guys want. Mars, Saturn, hard aspects, oppositions, conjunctions in particular. We see a lot of issues with structure. Structure like buildings that are collapsing. We see submarines that explode. We see dams that break. We can see some major catastrophe that can be happening in some way, shape, or form. So thinking about how this is very military oriented, I'm wondering if it's going to be like, revolving around like Navy bases in particular with Saturn and Neptune and Aries. It can also be things that are kind of dealing with activity around certain like waterways where there is trade. So like, where there are certain parts of the world where they have like trade routes and stuff for like ships to go through. Is there conflict in some of those areas? Is there going to be a blockage in an area like that? It can also mean that there could be issues revolving around like a building site, particularly at a one, and like injuries or people who are like injured on the job, or there is some kind of like building that falls, or there is some foundational issue. And then all of a sudden now it's like, okay, now it becomes like a huge like legal matter, and whether or not there was like negligence in making sure that the site and the way that things were being built, or the way that they were actually conducting the build was done to code, right? So then there could be some issues like that. So I think I would be really keeping my eye on like military stuff. And Saturn and Neptune can be dealing with like oil and gas. It can also deal with destruction as a result of flooding or as a result of storms. So I would be watching for that as well. But I keep going back to, okay, covert conflicts. Is there going to be some kind of weird, behind the scene power play where there's like a cyber attack and, nations are negotiating trade deals publicly, but they're secretly kind of like competing for resources, especially because Mars is in opposition to Saturn and Neptune, but it's trining Uranus. So it's opening the door to like anything that can go kind of haywire with like digital stuff or technology, particularly apps, internet, that stuff. And it's also trining Pluto. So even though a trine is in theory good, we've got a trine with some of the heavy hitting planets, which creates chaos, conflict, and power issues. So, it could be nuclear with Pluto and Aquarius. It could be, something in regards to just like storms, and storms are definitely going to be a big thing now with Uranus in Gemini, and the impact that potentially has on structures, buildings, power and internet. So that's something else I was thinking about. I think that we're going to see definitely a lot of more talks about what's going on in legal matters in the world. I think that a lot of it's going to be more revolving around like diplomacy. We might see some changes of alliances or some breakdown of certain partnerships. In particular, if people aren't owning up to their end of the bargain. So if there have been agreements, if there has been, an agreement to have a certain trade deal, or if there was an agreement that there was going to be a peace deal, or there was going to be a ceasefire, or if certain people were going to follow through on certain promises and they don't do that, that leaders can get particularly kind of hard-headed about whether or not they want to work and kind of connect and collaborate with certain nations. And we could actually see some split apart, and we could see other, leaderships come together. So it'll be hard to say. I'm hoping that the diplomacy of Mars and Libra can be positive, but if there ends up being like a major separation, or if there ends up being like a major feud, it'll make major headlines because Mars will trine Uranus and Pluto. So it'll be like certain allies maybe that the United States have had for a while, or that, we were building towards a relationship and then there's a fallout, or vice versa. So you could see one of those things. All right, so what I would like to do is I want to show you guys how this is going to be manifesting for each and every one of the rising signs. I'm just purely focusing on the Mars, Saturn, Neptune opposition. So I would like to make it a little bit more personal for you guys. I'm going to be showing you your rising sign. So to get to most of my predictions, I'm a Western astrologer. I'm going to be using the whole sign chart. I'm going to be showing you your rising sign. And what I want to do is I want to show you the Mars placement, and that's going to be in Libra, and that's where you're going to be seeing either the fight or the action or the heat or the flames, okay? So the action is going to be where Mars is. Then I'm going to show you where Saturn and Neptune and Aries is, and that's where there's either boundaries, limitations, maybe even a little bit of doubt or confusion. And then I'm going to show you where Jupiter and Venus are, and to be honest with you, that is the saving grace. That can actually give you a little bit of shelter and security. And it can really help you feel a little bit better about some of the tension that we are experiencing over the next couple of days. Definitely listen for your rising sign first. That's going to tell you where this is going to be happening in your life. And listen to your sun sign as well as your moon sign. The sun sign is definitely going to apply, especially when it comes to like career and your overall joy or goals. And the moon sign is more family related. Definitely listen to all three if you want to get a full picture of how this is going to manifest for you. And please don't forget, if you have anything from 0 to 3 degrees of the cardinal signs, you're feeling this square in particular, as well as my Aries, my Scorpio, my Capricorns, and my Aquariuses, and obviously you as well, Libra. All right, so let's go ahead and start with Aries and Aries rising. Aries, so this is a big deal for you because you are just written all over these transits. Not only is Mars your chart ruler in your opposite sign of the 7th house, but it's opposing Saturn and Neptune in your sign. So my thought is Aries is like, wherever Mars goes is where you are. And perhaps maybe the Mars 7th house transit kind of gets kicked off with a bit of a bang. It's possible that you meet somebody who's really fired up about you. You might have a new therapist. You might meet a new romantic partner. It could be even your spouse. It could be, just relationships in general. There's a lot of action there. And it can mean that you're wanting to get more involved in relationships, or you're wanting to date again and you want to get back out there. But it's about relationships, love, friendships, even rivals. And what you're pushing for is you're pushing for fairness, and you're trying to really find ways to negotiate in a relationship of some kind. Now, the challenge is that even though you're wanting to move full steam ahead in that department, Mars is in opposition to Saturn and Neptune in your sign. So the action, the conflict, the focus is going to be brought on through actions with other people. And Saturn and Neptune, which is retrograde in your sign, in your first house, might have you feel like it's kind of like blocking your self-expression, or, you're feeling maybe extra heavy because of the sign that it's in, and maybe Neptune's making you question who you are. And you might want to shine, you might want to be in partnerships and relationships, but you might doubt yourself, you might feel stuck, or you might feel unsure. Here's the theme. When other people bring forward some kind of concern or some kind of conflict, or if other people want to get testy, you're being asked to not just be somebody's doormat. You're also being asked to recognize where, you have to kind of pick your battles. Some people might just be having a bad day. They might just, need to vent. And you may not have to react or kind of assert yourself in any way, shape, or form. In other situations, other people will do that, and it's supposed to be about you kind of going like, okay, do I want to have that energy around me, and like who or what is disrupting my peace? The positive is that where you're going to find, I think, security in the midst of the storm is that Venus and Jupiter are meeting in your fourth house of home and family. So if you're leaning into creating a comfortable home space, if you're leaning into spending time with family, maybe sprucing up your space, spending time with loved ones, hosting a family dinner or doing something where you can rest and recharge, that can keep the peace. But certainly if there are expansions or new things happening at home, there can also be some tension that can come up in relationships because things might be developing and growing at such a rapid pace, right? Anyway, I hope that's helpful for you, Aries. Hang in there. Let me know how it goes for you. All right, we've got Taurus and Taurus rising. What's up, Taurus? You'll be experiencing Mars in Libra in your 6th house in opposition to Saturn and Neptune in Aries in your 12th. Oh, my Tauruses. So for both you and Scorpio, the 6th and the 12th house can be houses that can get a little kind of complicated. Obviously, the positive is that Mars does very well in the 6th house. It likes to take charge. It wants to have a to-do list. Likely you're going to be focusing on tackling work or health routines. And really what you're aiming for is balance. So you might be feeling like you're revamping your schedule, or you're striving for like a better work-life harmony. Now, Mars rules your 7th house of relationships. It also is directly connected to your 12th house of self-undoing, what's hidden and what's behind the scenes. So it's almost like you're trying to get some kind of work done, but you feel like you're hitting a wall. And the 6th house is about those health habits, working out, what you're eating, staying organized. But the 12th house is like emotional things, subconscious things, your sleep. It can also be about feeling run down. It could be about your spiritual kind of well-being. So when you see Mars in opposition to Saturn and Neptune in your 12th house, Saturn is going to be feeling like it's limiting your inner world, and Neptune is like making things a little bit more kind of clouded and confusing. And you might feel stressed, but you can't quite pinpoint why. Something just kind of feels off. So my advice is you have to find that balance between work and your private life, your home life, work and play, what have you. Mars can mean that there is a little bit of tension that's maybe kind of going on with coworkers. Maybe there's some tension that's going on also in a relationship, and you can't quite put your finger on it. You're like, I can feel that something is off, but I don't really know where it's coming from. The positive is that you are going to have your chart ruler, Venus, coming into conjunction with Jupiter, and that's going to be in your 3rd house. So it's going to really help you when it comes to communication. It's also going to be really beneficial for you to like have a chat with siblings, maybe go for a walk, do some journaling, maybe, having a heartfelt conversation with someone to kind of clear your mind. And I feel like this is about communicating and talking about change and the feeling that change is coming. How it's coming, I don't know. It could be a change of mind. It could be a change of heart. But whatever this is, if you're thinking about it, vocalizing it, communicating, writing it down, or making time maybe to, do a little meditation and journaling to just kind of break up your day. Becoming more so aware, being able to pinpoint what's actually shifting for you or what needs to shift is likely what's going to be kind of coming up. So I hope that that's helpful for you guys. I hope you can make some time to balance that out and that you're taking good care of your health and your overall well-being. All right, we've got Gemini and Gemini rising. Gemini, you're going to be experiencing Mars in Libra going through your 5th house in opposition to Saturn and Neptune in Aries in your 11th house. Now, there are some ways out for you. I would say you and Aquarius are really going to benefit from the trines that you're going to see from Mars. So I would encourage the air signs to lean into that. It's going to be easier. It's going to help you get out of the trap of the Saturn-Neptune opposition. Obviously, Mars in your 5th house is bringing up this theme of, pouring energy into creativity, into romance, right? Into passion projects, into hobbies, maybe into hanging out with your kids, or maybe you're just feeling like you want to have more fun, you want to flirt, you want to have a good time. The problem is that it's going to come into an opposition with Saturn and Neptune in your 11th house. So it's going to be bringing up, even though you want passion, you want playtime, Saturn and Neptune in your 11th is restricting your social life. It's the friends that aren't available. It's the friends that are going through stuff. It's feeling like maybe there is some isolation or maybe kind of separation, or maybe you're just questioning, who are my friends? Who can I go and kind of connect and collaborate with? So it will make your social life feel a little restricted. Neptune might have you kind of questioning or feeling like your goals are a little bit cloudy. And you might feel like a new group is off, or maybe like there is some sense of it being like exclusive, like you're not being included or invited in some way, and you feel like kind of alienated. So the way through that is to lean into the Venus-Jupiter conjunction, which is going into your 2nd house. Obviously, this is really focusing on self-worth. A lot of like, I don't need to feel complete or whole because I'm invited or because I'm wanted, right? And really treating yourself maybe to something cozy, maybe really making sure that you're taking care of your emotions, you're nurturing yourself, you're babying yourself, you're treating yourself in some way. And I also would really focus on that Mars trine Uranus. The more that you're willing to say, you know what, I can be spontaneous, I can go and have fun by myself, or I can hang out with my partner, or I can hang out with a kid, it doesn't just have to be with friends. I can have fun in a different way, and I'm not going to let other people's kind of feeling or being bogged down or being kind of cut off keep me from having fun or keep me from creating. Then you're going to be just fine. Good luck. All right, we've got Cancer and Cancer rising. What's up, Cancer? You are going to experience Mars going into Libra in your 4th house of home and family, opposing Saturn and Neptune in your 10th house of career. So if you are an early degree Cancer, 0 to about 3 degrees, you are under a rare Saturn square. So Saturn is going through your 10th house of career, squaring your Cancer placements, and now here comes Mars moving into your home zone. So you're really with this, you're balancing your home life, and you're trying to balance what's kind of going on or what's changing at home or with your family or even emotionally with what's happening at work, okay? The opposition to your 10th house. So there could be moves, there could be redecorations, there could be some family challenges. There could also be, kids that are in the home or coming to visit or coming to stay because of Mars' connection to your 5th. It could also mean that you're trying to find ways to kind of cut back from work, take time off of work, retire. Maybe you're trying to find a job where you can work from home, but you're feeling like you're being pulled in 2 completely different directions here. And Saturn is tied to bosses, parents, anything revolving around authority figures and partners. So there can be a sense of being like, well, I'm needed at home and this stuff is kind of going on, or I'm in the midst of moving and, it's just not good timing with what's going on at work. So Saturn's really pressuring your career, and then Neptune has you going, well, where is my career going? What's happening? And you might feel like maybe a career change or a promotion is out of reach. You may feel like something needs to change on the home front before you make a change at work, or maybe now that work is wrapping up, now it's giving you the freedom to move and relocate if that's something you're thinking about doing. Certainly like parenting stuff and relationship with family is like a huge theme. So I could see some people that are like, well, somebody's moving back into my house or they're moving out, and that's impacting something revolving around just where or how I can work. Now, the silver lining is that Venus and Jupiter are meeting in your sign. So even though, work feels like it's been pretty, demanding, Saturn and Neptune retrograde, so it's going to ease up a little bit. There is action that needs to be taken at home. And really it's going to be about what you can really, apply yourself to. Jupiter is about like fixing things and making things organized and better and more comfortable. And Mars in the fourth house is a perfect time to have like a to-do list. So if you've been meaning to get stuff done at home, I would say now is a good time to do it. And also, this is a lot about your emotions, your joy. It's like, don't let whatever happens this week kind of knock you off, course. Stay optimistic with Jupiter in your first house. Keep your humor about you, Try to focus on the blessings. Try to kind of keep moving through it and not allow the heaviness of work and home to make you feel depleted. Maybe, treat yourself to a spa day. Do something where you're going to be really focusing on your personal health and maybe making some kind of an investment into your health, like getting a massage, joining a gym, doing something that is going to be, even with your pets, right? Jupiter can be like hanging out with pets or with animals and finding ways to also smooth things over at work. Like Jupiter Venus would be, maybe you are, not able to show up and be at work and you're off for a couple days and, one of your coworkers covers for you. And then when you come back, you bring them something sweet, Venus, Jupiter, you bring them flowers, you bring them like snacks. Just say thank you for like covering for me from when I was gone. So try to see the positive and the silver lining in some of the stuff that's happening. Look forward to the improvements and the things that can kind of be happening on the home front while maybe you're taking some time away from work. Good luck. We've got Leo and Leo rising. You guys are going to be experiencing Mars in the sign of Libra in your third house, opposing Saturn and Neptune in Aries in your ninth. So I guess for you, something that's beneficial is Mars sextiles your sign and Saturn trines your sign. So a little bit easier for you to navigate still. Maybe you're going to be feeling it in regards to travel or education or relationship department. Obviously, Mars in the third house is about being fired up about communication. So maybe you're pitching ideas, maybe you're learning, maybe you're wanting to book a road trip, maybe you're focusing a lot on relationship communication. And then Mars comes into an opposition with Saturn and Neptune right off the bat, which is going to have you feel like Saturn is like blocking your travel or your beliefs. And Neptune might kind of cloud your vision revolving around, what do I believe in? What do I want to study? Where am I traveling? Why am I here? And the course feels like a little overwhelming right now of how you proceed forward. Saturn represents relationships, so there could be some difficulty communicating with relationships at a distance, difficulty planning travel. Maybe there's some difficulty seeing eye to eye with like a teacher, an educator, a lawyer even, and feeling like you're not speaking the same language as another person. The silver lining here is that, the Venus-Jupiter conjunction is kind of lining up and it's in your 12th house, which means that it is going to give you the opportunity to really dive into spirituality, to really dive into meditation, reflection, alone time, like what you can find in the silence when you're not needing to be connecting or communicating with other people. Rather than having like a heated philosophical debate, you would go, actually, I'm just going to kind of meditate on this and recognize or realize that it's not worth trying to kind of argue something with someone or trying to get my point across to someone. And it's also a really wonderful time to start focusing on, the insights that come from peace and kind of being alone. Maybe there can be some really significant dreams or there could be some really significant insights Maybe you're traveling, right? And you're going somewhere and you're traveling to another country and it takes you a little bit longer if you're traveling around this period, or it takes you longer to get from point A to point B. But then when you get there, you're like, oh, this is so beautiful. And it was like definitely worth the 3 flights to get to this country. And now I can just kind of like rest and like relax and like now kind of get on like a new time zone with Venus and Jupiter in the 12th house. If you happen to be traveling around a foreign land, something you might find is that there's just a language barrier. Communicating with people can be difficult. It can also be difficult kind of with transportation and getting around, but you may very well be in a very beautiful space. Good luck. We've got Virgo and Virgo rising. You guys are going to be experiencing Mars going through Libra, opposing Saturn and Neptune in Aries in your 8th, and Mars is in your 2nd. So for you and Pisces, these are very financial transits as your 2nd and 8th house are kind of getting hit. Now, Mars going into your 2nd house, there is this huge focus on money, right? And it can be spending money, consuming things, buying things, also focusing on your self-worth, and also pushing for financial fairness. And this can be something like maybe negotiating a raise or negotiating a deal, working something out when it comes to your money versus somebody else's money, all right? Now, Saturn and Neptune in your 8th house does bring up some kind of limitation in regards to share resources, and it could mean that there are some difficulties, working out a trust or a tax matter. There could be some challenges talking to your partner about budgeting and spending, or maybe you're trying to kind of get a handle on debt and you're trying to pay stuff off. Regardless, with Neptune being there, it definitely clouds issues revolving around trust or intimacy or transparency when it comes to finances. So it's possible that a joint financial deal feels unclear, or it's not quite settled, or there's something that hasn't been totally aired out about joint finances or investments. Now, I would be very careful making any rush moves, buying something, charging something on the credit card with this, trying to take out a loan without fully looking at or understanding the terms. And also when it comes to maybe, paying for something that, you may not have to pay for. Saturn and Neptune could mean there could be an error when it comes to dealing with an insurance matter or with like a tax matter. Or anything revolving around debt. And so you might get a bill and go, okay, I'm just going to pay for this bill. But I would be like, actually, let's go and see like the itemized bill and the receipt. Did I already pay for it? Is this the right amount? What are these charges? Because there could be something that there could be like a discrepancy here. I think the positive is that you are going to see Jupiter and Venus coming into conjunction in the 11th house. So the silver lining is that, okay, you may be having, some tension in intimacy matters, right? Especially with a partnership. After all, Neptune rules your, 7th house of marriage. Saturn rules your 5th house of romance. If you're feeling like you're not connecting or you don't feel safe or secure in a relationship or things are rocky, you may have a lot of like security and kind of support coming from friends, which feel like family, very Venus and Jupiter in the 11th. So connecting with friends, joining a support group, maybe having a chat with your best friend, maybe going and hanging out at a family friend's house, going to a family gathering, right? These can be things that can kind of bring you back down to earth, give you that safety and security that you feel like you kind of need, and help you work through some of the issues where you're not really feeling supported, and like support can come in other ways that can be more platonic for you. Good luck, Virgo. All right, Libras and Libra risings. You guys are the ones that are raising hell with Mars moving through your sign over obviously the next several weeks, but in particular, it's going to kick off with a bang with Mars in your 1st house if you're a Libra rising, coming into an opposition with Saturn and Neptune in Aries in your 7th house. Well, what can I say? I mean, I think that Mars in the 1st house is going to be about drive and ambition, and it's going to be about the first thing that you do in the morning. So, being a Libra rising myself, I've kind of looked at this transit going like, okay, that entire week, I'm going to make sure that I am going to be up and I'm going to be finding something to do. Whether that is working out, if that is going to be, food prepping, if that is going to be, walking the dogs, if it's going to be cleaning, reading a book, something. I'm using this as an opportunity to kind of hit restart with the things that I do first thing in the morning to start my day. Okay, so you want to use Mars in a productive way. The challenge is that Mars is going to make an opposition to Saturn and Neptune in your relationship house. So, okay, Mars in the first. Maybe you have more energy. Maybe you're feeling a little feisty. Maybe you're more confident. Maybe you're more bold. Maybe you're redefining yourself and updating your style in some way. But the problem is that it's going to oppose planets in your 7th house, where that is about relationships. So whether it's your spouse, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your business partner, a client, a therapist, somebody, they are going to be a little bit either cold or distant, or there is going to be a sense of them acting like kind of like disengaged. And a relationship can feel very challenging because Saturn is creating that boundary, and Neptune is about them not necessarily being self-aware or being checked in or not knowing where they're going. And because Mars rules your 7th house and it's in the first, it's a lot of like you getting in the driver's seat going, okay, you may not know where you're going. I've been following you. I don't know what we're doing here in this relationship or in this dynamic. Or maybe you're a single Libra rising and you're like, I've been waiting for a partner. I don't know when's going to show up. I don't want to wait anymore. Or I'm not waiting for somebody to figure it out and come back. I'm going to start doing me. And Mars in the first house is very powerful because it's going to trine Uranus, which means it's going to give you time for traveling, learning, education. It's also going to be trining Pluto in your 5th house, having new opportunities for self-expression, creativity, and having fun. So there's a lot of not waiting for other people to show up and make you feel supported. It's about being your own cheerleader and learning not to get angry or agitated about other people not really knowing where they stand right now. Instead, using this as an opportunity, whether you're single or you're taking some space from someone, to do something productive and to really empower yourself. Now, the positive / powerful thing that's good about this is that Venus, which happens to be your chart ruler, is coming into conjunction with Jupiter in your 10th house of career. So, I mean, it sounds kind of like silly, but it's like, okay, you know, if you're not in a relationship, you can get a lot of work done. You can really focus on creativity and your success and like really putting yourself out there and getting recognition at work. If you're in a relationship and things just feel a little distant right now, you know, maybe it's about really just throwing yourself into work and really shining when it comes to a heartfelt project or really kind of standing out in a big way. And I think that this is also going to be a time that's more about you and it's like less about other people. So hopefully things go well for you, Libras and Libra risings. I hope that you use this transit as something that's beneficial for you for the next couple of weeks. You'll have to let me know how it plays out. All right, we've got Scorpio and Scorpio rising. You guys are going to experience Mars going through Libra, in the 12th house, opposing Saturn and Neptune and Aries in your 6th house. And Mars rules your chart, Scorpio, so this is important for you. Oh, Mars going into the 12th house. Self-sabotage, especially in relationships. Reassessing and reevaluating where you've been, what you've done, decisions you've made. The 12th house is like unfinished business. So what is kind of like unfinished in relationship realm, or, maybe there is dealing with inner frustration, or maybe you're feeling like things are a bit stagnant right now, especially because Mars is in opposition to Saturn and Neptune in your 6th. Very similar to Taurus, Scorpio, when you're dealing with the 12th and the 6th house, there is this sense of, one side affecting the other, and thus is an opposition. But I think with Mars going through the 12th house, it's basically saying you have to rest. You have to take time. You can't just be burning yourself out. You can't be overworking or overworking out or being overly critical or not tending to wounds or not taking time to kind of like really pause and reflect and kind of break up some of your schedule. Saturn and Neptune in your 6th house has had you probably working like a dog. And, as Mars goes through your 12th, you're exploring more of your subconscious, and also it's about spirituality. So it'd be a good time to dive into meditation. Also, anything that's balance oriented. So like yoga, any kind of stretching, if you want to do any kind of dancing, that could be good also for Mars in the 12th house. And leaning into meditation or any self-reflection kind of habit. And then that limitation is going to be the opposition of Saturn and Neptune in your 6th, where you're going to feel like, well, I can't stay in bed. I can't sleep. I got to get stuff done. And you're going to feel like Saturn is blocking routines, and Neptune can be, feeling fatigued or feeling under the weather. It could even mean that there's changes going on at work, or maybe there's lack of work, or something going on with pets that's kind of making you go, how am I ever going to get any sleep? Or how am I going to ever get anything done? So, it's going to be harder to stick to a new habit right now. And I would say now is not the time to be like, I must be hitting the gym. I must be doing the diet. No, there's actually a sense of needing to become aware of what you need to release first and where you actually need to be winding down. And if health stuff is coming up, it might be coming up because you need more rest and recuperation. The positive is that you've got Jupiter and Venus in conjunction coming together in a fellow sister water sign. So it's going to be trining, especially if you have anything, I would say 10 to 15 degrees. Your sun, moon, or rising is a Scorpio, which is a water trine. You'll have a grand trine, which is great. And Venus is obviously the ruler of your relationships. Jupiter moving through the 9th house does very well there. And what it wants you to do is it wants you to expand your horizons. It sounds like counterproductive because some of you guys are going to be like, I am not working, or I don't have enough work, or I'm working too much. But like Jupiter and Venus in the 9th is like, you meet somebody who lives in another city that says, hey, take a weekend off, come and see me. You decide to go and take a new program, or you just take a course to break up some of your routine. You decide that you want to get away for a couple of days and you want to travel somewhere, or you want to plan a trip, or you want to take a course. This is about indulging in pleasure, expanding your horizons, traveling, taking a course, maybe reading an inspiring book, something that's going to lift your spirits. And it could also mean that you're kind of learning a lot more about health and wellness as well, because Jupiter could be about diet, fitness, and also learning about financial things. A lot of Scorpio risings are going to go, well, I'm under the weather, or I'm not feeling well, or I'm not working. So what do I need to do? A lot of you guys are going to be educating yourselves about finance because of Jupiter's connection. Anyway, hopefully that's helpful. Let me know how that lands for you, Scorpio. All right, we got Sag and Sag rising. You guys are going to experience Mars going through the sign of Libra in your 11th house, making an opposition to Saturn and Neptune in Aries in your 5th house. Oh, my Sagittariuses. A little bit easier for you guys. Obviously, Mars is friendly with your sign. Aries is friendly with your sign. So you've got sextiles and trines that can kind of help you wean your way through it. And the silver lining is Venus conjunct Jupiter in Cancer, and Jupiter rules your chart. So it actually tells me that there are some really positive things that are about to start happening. It may not seem positive out the gate, but it will be good for you, at least on an emotional or home or financial level. So Mars going through the 11th house is traditionally a pretty busy period socially. There's parties, there's gatherings, there's togetherness. And usually Mars in Libra here is really pushing for fairness in groups or goals, like leading a team project, right? And the challenge is that Mars is going to oppose Saturn and Neptune in your 5th, where there is going to be either limitation or confusion revolving around, creativity, self-employment, children, romance, maybe even kind of clouding creative processes or passion. And you might feel like there's a group project, or there's like a party, or there's something socially, or like a club that you're wanting to start or participate in, and you're like, something just feels blocked. Like, what is going on? Why does this feel blocked? It could be creative blocks, right? It could also mean that, you're not really feeling super joyful, or you're not really experiencing a lot of happiness right now, and you're hoping that you can kind of receive some joy from a friend, or a community, or a network. And you're like, I'm seeking something outside of me. And maybe it's good, especially if you're a creative or if you're self-employed, to surround yourself with people who do some of the same things, because they can kind of inspire you. Now, the silver lining is like that Venus-Jupiter conjunction in Cancer in your 8th. It means that there will be opportunities for you to deepen intimacy throughout this transit. It's about being vulnerable and maybe having a heart-to-heart with someone, and that may help heal, especially if you're having like a little bit of like a tiff with a friend. Like Mars in opposition to Saturn and Neptune could mean there's somebody who's being a little passive aggressive, or somebody who you had like a fight with, who's like a friend, and you're like, man, that really just like upset me and it hurt me. And like, rather than just having a friendship breakup, it's about kind of leveling with them and being like, actually, you know what? Like, I'm going through some stuff, haven't talked about it. This is what I'm dealing with. And like opening up to them and letting them know. So the friend isn't taking it personally, or if you're not taking it personally, if there's something that one of the two of you guys do not know. So being open and being kind of, transparent about stuff, I think can actually be quite beneficial. The only other way I could see this is just like the responsibilities revolving around caretaking. So like children, having kids, taking care of kids, being with kids, and the limitation with friends, and like where there is positive growth that might be happening for you or your family. And you've got an expanding family, but also there can be a sense of like not having that same social connection and like the dynamic being different, or friends and social connections not approving of a romantic partner and being a little bit more critical about somebody that you're potentially dating. And then, trying to find ways to talk to them and confiding in them about, how you feel or what your relationship is going like, and giving them a little bit more information to see if they can be supportive of your partner. Anyway, hopefully that's helpful for you, Sag. Let me know what's going on. We've got Capricorn and Capricorn rising. What's up, Capricorn? Mars is going through Libra in your 10th house of career and reputation. Obviously 10 signs away from you, so it represents some kind of like personal karma, especially when it comes to career and relationships. Mars will be in opposition to Saturn in Aries in your 4th house, and Saturn rules you. So Saturn getting hit with the opposition for Mars for you in Aquarius can be a little prickly. So the 10th house is about, I think, really taking action in your career. And Mars there is about taking bold steps like pitching for leadership roles, maybe feeling like you're really taking action with relationships with people professionally and like wanting to connect and collaborate with them. Maybe you're feeling a little bit more competitive, or maybe just work is really ramping up. The challenge here is that it's in opposition to Saturn, your chart ruler in the 4th house, which is retrograde with Neptune. So you're seeing that there's both limitation and also confusion revolving around, well, there's something going on at home. There is like some restriction in the home life. You're confused with what's happening with family plans. A move or somebody moving in or some change with the home and family feels very unclear. And you're getting pulled in two separate directions. Positive, I would say, is number one, the silver lining is the Jupiter-Venus conjunction where you can find some kind of shelter is your 7th house. So this can strengthen partnerships. It can mean that you end up meeting somebody in the midst of this time. There could be a therapist. There could be a new relationship. It could also strengthen family bonds. If you're in a committed partnership, it could actually give you an opportunity to really lean on your spouse and kind of be like, look, this is really difficult. I need some help. But it can also push you to go and like work with an astrologer or even work with a therapist, because that can be your 7th house. But I've seen a lot of Capricorns and Capricorn risings that suddenly are like, oh my gosh, now I'm having to balance a new work responsibility or finding a new job or going back to work or taking on a new career and being a single mom, or, my family's, my dad's moving in with me. My brother lost his house, he's moving in with me. These kinds of things can be happening where suddenly, there's going to be more responsibility on the home front. And yes, you're going to be pulled in two different directions, but you got to make time. If you're the like answer man, right, you need to make time to be able to talk to somebody too. And whether that's pillow talk with a romantic partner, or, your biweekly kind of meeting with a therapist, or if you decide, that you're going to work with a coach, or if you're going to work with an astrologer, Jupiter and Venus in your 7th is somebody who's going to be giving you advice into how to kind of navigate this. And it can be somebody very nurturing, very kind. And equally, it can also really better certain romantic and family type relationships, as long as you're willing to kind of let them support you, right? Anyway, I hope that is helpful for you, Capricorn. Certainly a colorful transit for you guys. I think once you get over this opposition, things will improve a little bit, but it certainly looks like it's just been chaos between work and also home and family obligations. So hang in there. And we've got Aquarius and Aquarius rising. You guys are going to be experiencing Mars in Libra in a fellow sister air sign in your 9th, in opposition to Saturn and Neptune in Aries in your 3rd. Interesting aspects all around because, and I said this, I think, in one of my other videos, but just the fact that Mars is making so many aspects to planets that directly deal with you, it's wild. So positive is that Mars going through the ninth house is definitely going to make you feel like you're chasing big ideas. And these big ideas could mean going back to school, teaching a class, publishing something, changes in your beliefs, advocating for a cause, planning a trip, traveling, something like that is happening. And it's also trining your modern day ruler, Uranus in the fifth. So spontaneous travel, having fun, being creative, falling in love. And it's also trining Pluto in your sign. So you're really feeling the effects of the grand air trine pretty positively. And it can really make you feel like there are new things happening and new ideas that are coming into fruition. And like life feels like it can be changing day by day. The challenge is that it is opposing Saturn, which is your traditional ruler, as well as Neptune and Aries in your third. And so when we look at like the limitation or confusing aspect of that, basically what's going to come up for you is you're going to feel like Saturn's really blocking communication, and there can be some confusing or clouded communication as well. Writing might feel scattered. You might feel like because you're traveling, it's throwing off a writing routine. You might feel like there is some, conflict that you're having with a teacher or a mentor, or there could be some legal issues. There could also be some delays or some setbacks with travel. Now, I do think that, off the bat, having Mars in opposition to Saturn is a lot of like Saturn retrograde, learning to listen. And when you're listening, what you're going to learn with Mars in the ninth house. What do you learn about fairness and diplomacy? What do you learn about relationships? And that there can be somebody who can come in who you have a conversation with, or maybe there's an author that you're listening to, maybe there's like a podcaster or motivational speaker who's going to be giving you some insight into how to tackle negative self-talk, how to work through personal blockages, how to be more positive, how to stay consistent, when it comes to your frame of mind or even just your lifestyle, your habits. The silver lining here, there's a lot of them for you guys. I think just the trine that you have is amazing. But the silver lining is also that Venus is conjunct Jupiter, and it's going to be in Cancer in your sixth house. So obviously the sixth house is going to be about routines. So your home routine in particular, I think Cancer in the sixth house, your emotional kind of health. Start a healthy meal plan, do things to kind of feel centered. Maybe this means that, you're making more time with your family and you're breaking up some of your studies. Maybe it means that, you're actually getting a new job, which is going to, make you feel a little bit more optimistic and, more enthusiastic about life. It could also mean that something that you're doing in terms of physical health or fitness has a pretty significant or positive impact on like your mental health. Jupiter and Venus in Cancer could also be great for like you're going to a spa, you're maybe doing some laps in a pool. Maybe it means that, you're joining like a new health club. Maybe you're working with a new, healer or practitioner. Maybe it means that you're like, hey, I'm getting a pet. I'm getting a dog. Cancer can be dogs. Something that's going to keep you consistent with what? Saturn in the third house things, walking, breaking up your routine. If you have something that you have to take care of outside of yourself, it can actually be really beneficial, and you're not going to feel like you're so much in the grind when it comes to studying, learning, or having to be writing if you work in any of those fields. Anyway, I hope that that's helpful for you guys. Watch out with some of the conflicts legally and some of the delays that can happen with travel around this period. And then we've got Pisces and Pisces rising. You guys are going to be experiencing Mars going through Libra in your natal 8th house, in opposition to Saturn and Neptune in your natal 2nd in Aries. Pisces, interesting stuff because you're ruled by both Neptune and Jupiter. So there's sweet and salty aspects for you. Like Virgo, this is very financial. So there's a lot of what is my money? What am I spending? What do I owe people? What do people owe me? And kind of sorting and sifting through expenses and debt. And if not, then it's going to be other things like other people's budgets, other people's money, tax-related matters, inheritances, things kind of connected to insurance. And this is because Mars is moving through Libra in your 8th house. which deals with these topics. There's going to be more action in regards to other people's money or other people's resources. So you're going to be asked to balance intimacy or shared resources with the opposition to Saturn and Neptune in your second. So for some of you guys, it means that you're paying off a bill. Some of you guys, it means you're negotiating a financial deal. I really see Saturn and Neptune retrograde in your second house as like, it's not my expense to pay. It's not my bill to pay, or it's not my responsibility to cover this, or I don't have the funds for this. So therefore, it needs to be loaned, it needs to be charged, or it needs to be coming from somebody else, or somebody else owes me something, 8th house. And with Saturn and Neptune in your second, Saturn can limit money or self-worth. There can be a less than mentality. There can be this like lack mindset. Maybe with Neptune there, it's kind of clouding something about your values, and your financial goals might feel vague, but they also might feel out of reach. And I would say just be very careful with any borrowing or lending or spending, as Mars rules your money and it's in the 8th. So there can be some debt that can kind of be piling up with this. And with Saturn and Neptune, there can be lack of awareness or actual plan to kind of cover it, or how to deal with these new financial changes. Cutting, separating, or severing finances can be another thing. So some of you guys will be like, I'm switching banks, or, I'm like opening a separate account, or I'm dividing assets with another person. That could be happening. And I would say the silver lining is that Jupiter, your traditional ruler, is conjuncting Venus in your 5th. So this means that there's going to be opportunities for breakthroughs in matters of the heart. So there might be this sense of being like, well, it's going to cost me, but it's really going to make my kid happy. Or, it's going to be quite the business expense or investment, but, I want to start my own business, so I'm going to take the loan. Or, I would like to spend the money, but I know that I shouldn't. I need to be more conservative because I'm actually investing in, my art or my own creative hobbies. So I'm spending less money, so I have less expenses, that kind of stuff. So this is about really embracing, with Venus and Jupiter in your 5th house, creativity, self-expression, joy. This is about painting, dancing, flirting, having fun. And so yeah, life can feel heavy, expenses can feel heavy. There can be bills that can be due, and you could be dealing with a limited budget. But does that keep you from having fun? Does that keep you from having a date night? Does that keep you from still enjoying your hobbies? No, you're just going to do it in a way that's going to be more conservative and not necessarily breaking the bank, right? Anyway, I hope that is helpful for you guys. Let me know how that manifests for you. And for everyone, this week's going to feel like a bit of like a cosmic whirlwind, obviously, with this Mars in opposition to Saturn and Neptune. So as a reminder, from August 6th to the 10th, that's when you are going to be in this window of balancing action with boundaries and really looking at clarity when it comes to our dreams and how we are kind of participating in relationship with other people. Watch for those sneaky conflicts, the diplomatic drama, and obviously there can be some subtle shade. But I think you guys have got this. Lean into the Jupiter-Venus conjunction. That's going to give you guys shelter from the storm. And I hope that gives you some help in kind of navigating this next week. Regardless of your rising sign, I think the transits are really showing us that it's time to grow and it's time to kind of show up and to shine. Let me know how this is hitting for you guys. Drop me a comment below. Let me know where this is taking place in your chart. Were you born with Saturn in opposition to Mars? Can you give us any tips? And especially if you have any of the major hitting signs, if you happen to be like the Aries, the Libras, the Capricorns, the Aquariuses, Scorpios, Aries. I mean, there's a number of them, but I'd love to hear how this manifests for you guys, and we'll see how it kind of plays out in terms of the world events. Obviously, they can be kind of heavy, so I'm hoping that that's not the case. And don't forget to please like, share, and subscribe. Click the bell button below. I'm here Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, and Sundays. You guys will catch me back here on Thursday, so I'll see you in just a few short days. And until next time, stay cool, calm, collected, put down those boxing gloves, aim for balance and peace, try to be diplomatic, and I will see you guys very soon. Take care.